Hello and welcome in, friends, to another edition of the Two Nerds of a Feather podcast. I'm your host, Mike Mercado, with the one, the only, E-Train Everitt O'Neill. E-Train, welcome to the Mercado Airwaves studio.
I'm finally here. I don't know why, but that's become kind of my trademark. Whenever you introduce me now, I do that thing.
That thing?
Yeah, it's like, hey.
Well, you just letting them know you're just striking a pose. We thank you each and every one of you for joining us on this edition of the Two Nerds of a Feather podcast. Thank you guys so much for the support on last week's edition where we did a crossover between Sports from the Couch and the Two Nerds of a Feather podcast. And on today's edition, it's kind of another crossover, but I think this one much more, this past month was Mental Health Awareness Month.
Yes.
And there was big news in the sports world with the one and only Naomi Osaka. She is an absolute killer, one of the baddest tennis players on the planet, and she is now out of the French Open. This is, already at this point, a few weeks has passed since this happened. But you and I were talking before we pressed record on this edition, and I thought it was an interesting conversation to just kind of talk about sports and media and mental health awareness. And I guess, first of all, the first thing I wanted to get across to the point is, what are your thoughts on the media, its relationship, and with athletes? Do you think that it's in a healthy place right now? Do you think it's in a bad place? What are your general thoughts? Somebody who's in the media, somebody who loves sports, but more than anything is a good dude. What are your thoughts on the relationship we're seeing right now between the two entities?
I would say, like just off the top of my head, I mean, the relationship between the media and athletes, it is what it's always been. I mean, I don't know if it's necessarily a positive or a negative one, but I don't like to say always, because the two words that you should not use in your vocabulary is always and never, because it's always never true. Mm-hmm. But, media has a tendency to want to push buttons and ask questions that, they probably wouldn't have the gall to ask if, it was a regular day-to-day conversation. And I think what gets lost is because, and we were talking about this last week, where, these athletes make all this money to perform at a very high level. We often forget that they're human beings, and we think that because they're in a different tax bracket than us, then that they aren't allowed to feel the feelings that they have or to go through regular human emotions. But they feel everything that we feel, but somehow it doesn't translate to us because there's this monetary barrier, between us. And I don't think it's fair, because you wouldn't say that to someone. You wouldn't say the things that you say to someone if they were your equal or, not even in your field. So why do people feel it's okay, to toe the line in that manner? I think a lot about a few years back, like when we were young pups, when Marinelli was still the coach of the Lions,
right? And
Rob Parker was asking him a question about I forget who Marinelli's son-in-law is.
I'm drawing a blank. Continue.
I'm drawing a blank too. Yeah. But Rob Parker asked a question along the line of, like, do you regret your daughter marrying him or something like that? And it's like, doggone well, if there wasn't any safety between this podium and the rest of the press between us, that if you were to ask me that on the streets, you wouldn't get slapped.
Joe Barry.
Mm-hmm. Joe Barry. He had asked a question about Joe Barry, because I think Joe Barry was like his D coordinator or something like that. And media kind of gets away with those kind of questions and just say that it's in the name of journalism, and that, as athletes, because it's part of your job, you just do it, you deal with it. And it's like, F that.
I think there's a lot of ways, a lot of roads you could go down with this one. I think, for example, what Naomi was going through specifically, she's dealing with the foreign press. She's dealing with something that, first of all, like here in the States, and when we're dealing with whether it's celebrities or these major sports, we see them very often. We see them a lot. They're obligated to, and we'll get into whether obligations should be needed or not. But we do have access with them, so there's no habitual line steppers there. For what Naomi's dealing with is you have somebody who's going to ask her what they thought about her form in this match play was, and then somebody's going to ask her about her relationship because they don't have the same type of access. So I think there is there is two worlds that we're talking about. Where I think it becomes a little weird is people who will say things out of line. like you said, where they won't say it in front of a person. I will never say anything on Sports from the Couch, The Good Brothers, Two Nerds of a Feather, whatever the case may be, if I don't believe it or if I won't say it in front of somebody's face.
Yeah.
Because you got to be held accountable at some point.
You got to have a code.
There has to be. I do think that there is ways of going at it. I can understand people's livelihood does revolve around each other. Look at, will these athletes be as famous? Would they have as lucrative careers if there wasn't such a fandom for access for them? You know, if there wasn't such a demand for it. But what I do think people also have to understand is we're replaceable too. Our job in media is not to be the story, it's to tell the story. I also do think that there has to be an acknowledgement from both sides that it is a symbiotic relationship. The problem I always get into, and it's not just a media thing, it's a fan thing, it's a societal thing, is your tax bracket demanding that depends, or that will decide where you are in a conversation. I'm like, look, just because LeBron James is rich doesn't mean he's not a human. Just because Russell Westbrook has an attitude on the court doesn't mean you throw popcorn at him. I do think that there's this weird entitlement that the media has. Because what does the media have a lot? The media has a lot of intellectuals, a lot of people who've gone through school, who do think that they're better than some of these athletes. And now, you know, this may be an uncomfortable thing, and I know for some people who hate media just as much as they had social issues, this is something that's very legit true. The athlete predominantly is people of color.
Yes.
And what are predominantly the color of the sports reporters?
The other.
So there is this.
No offense to the other brothers.
No, but there's a weird power dynamic. When you're being asked questions that some people may find demeaning by somebody who typically is being portrayed as an oppressor, that's heavy. You know, you're not a woman. Let's say somebody like Simone Biles. She's not going to ask questions from other 23-year-old black women. She's going to ask questions from 50-year-old white men.
Yeah.
Nothing wrong with you 50-year-old white men. The problem is, though, is like, how can you relate or understand or sympathize or ask a question to have some form of understanding if you've never walked a minute of their shoe? Where I do think it becomes a little iffy is what like Mayor Lightfoot did. It's like, yeah, I understand in theory you want to talk to black reporters, minority reporters. That makes sense, right? Like you want to be inclusive, exclusive, whatever the word is. But that's almost backwards because then you're doing the exact same thing everybody else has been doing, where you're keeping people out. The point isn't to be exclusive. It's to be inclusive. Everybody's supposed to be allowed. So I do think there is this, we do need to find this medium of like, we're all just media and we're all just people. We're supposed to have this relationship with one another that it's okay. I can ask. Where I think people get really mixed up is their entitlement of what kind of questions they can ask.
Yeah.
That I think it's really, and we've kind of been talking about this entire time, but is it appropriate to ask Aaron Rodgers about his brother after an NFC Championship game? No, right? Like, what does that have to do with the NFC Championship game? But you hear it all the time. What about speculation? You know, you hear Mike Florio throwing out numbers like 90% of players would do this. How do you know? Why are you, your job is to be a reporter. Why are you giving opinions like that about a sport that you cover? That's, I think, a real thing. Like, do you think we have some form of responsibility of, like, understanding when we're giving criticism or we're doing our job, and also then when we're giving an opinion?
I would say that I think we do have that responsibility because we have to be honest journalists, you know, and like when it comes to covering a sport, I think we should keep it at the level of sports performance and not asking Aaron Rodgers about his brother or Rod Marinelli about his, you know, son-in-law. Like, keep it at the level of sports. Don't try to make it personal because, you know, media people, especially if, you know, if they're at these conferences weekly and yearly, you know, there's this, I guess, pseudo relationship that's formed to where they feel like they probably have exclusive access to them, where they can ask these kind of questions. You know, it's one of those like, hey, I thought we were cool kind of things. And it's like, no, we're not that cool, bruh. Like, yeah, I might know you on a first name basis because I see you every once in a while, but, you know, you're crossing the line. And we were talking about this off the mic. Boundaries. Like, we live in an era, and I mean, we also come from an era where we grew up on shock jocks. And shock jocks were all about pushing the boundaries.
Mancow, Eddie and Jobo, Howard Stern, Opie and Anthony, so on and so forth.
Jim
Rome.
Don Imus.
Don Imus.
All of those guys. What's his name? Guy who just died.
Yes, I'll look it up. But yeah.
Him.
Yeah.
Limbaugh. That's
Rush
his name.
Limbaugh. Yes,
Limbaugh.
yes.
You know, these are guys who were highly opinionated and oftentimes would push boundaries. And but were also intellectuals. You know, smart guys.
Yeah, who could have a conversation, a thought, or could make a rational thought, or a cohesive thought at the very least.
And so we've graduated from, the shock jock era to the clout chasing era.
How much do you think like a Joe Rogan has affected this generation of podcasters, media members, like the Barstool era, these type of, I mean, look at Sports from the Couch, Mercado Airwaves kind of precedes some of that, but it's in the vein of all of it. Like, how much do you think it's influenced today's media where it's like the shock jock maybe is not Mancow or Howard Stern, it's now David Portnoy. Portnoy.
You even have like your Howard Cosell's and your Skip Baylesses.
Nick Wrights.
Jay Mariotti.
Oh, that's throwing it old school for the Chicago media right there, yeah.
But so I mean, this generation, they're kind of offsprings of those guys.
Sure.
But it's also a different day and age where that kind of stuff isn't going to fly anymore. And we were talking off the mic about it, and I know we're like going down several different rabbit holes, but
it's our show. We can do whatever we want.
But we were talking about how Cat Williams was on a Joe Budden podcast, and he, in my opinion, did a flawless dismantling of the idea of cancel culture, where in sports like basketball per se, like everyone would probably say they would be professional players if they lowered the rim 1 foot. There's a reason why there is an out of bounds on court, because there's a limit. There's a boundary that you just don't cross. If you cross out of bounds, it's going to stop the game.
Right.
Or stop the clock, whatever. There's just certain things that you can't do, and those limits are there because of that. And unfortunately, media sometimes think those limits don't apply to them. And they have that kind of protection because, I mean, for the most part, most press conferences are recorded. And so, if you happen to be the journalist that asked that one question, no matter what happens, that athlete's going to be the one that looks like, the bad guy if they get the reaction that you're probably trying to get out of them.
And a lot of it is just trying to get a reaction and clicks and wanting that. And I think that's the one thing that people in the media who aren't in the quote-unquote mainstream media have to be honest about it with other people is a lot of the news is made to manipulate you when it comes to these salacious type of stories. Yeah. When you talk about Aaron Rodgers and his brother, or we talking about Aaron Rodgers and Danica Patrick or whoever he's dating at the time, I think with Naomi, where it becomes interesting is we're talking about a 23-year-old half Asian, half black woman.
Yeah.
And, I'm going to be 100% honest. This is the show where we could be honest with each other. There's been times where Serena has rubbed me the wrong way. And I have fully known she's in the right, or at the very least, understanding her plight. And as a media member, I've had hard times, like, fully being on board because sometimes I feel attacked about it. But you have to have the wherewithal, or at least you have to have the mindset to be able to take a step back and understand what somebody like Serena has been the angry black woman in a white world forever.
And that's the trope that they want to go with.
That's exactly it. That's what they want to portray. Venus Williams comes out just a few days ago, and a lot of people give her crap because Venus has her own problems. But when she goes out there, she's like, I don't care what people have to say because none of y'all can play tennis on me. It's like, yeah, but there are journalists who take that as a slight. It's like, no, you can't. You're covering the sport because you can't play the sport at that level. Yeah. And that's a hard reality for a lot of people who are in our industry, who want to be rap stars, who want to be rock stars, who want to be actors, actresses, that you're not the story.
Yeah.
They try to become it, like Skip Bayless, Jim Rome. These guys have made it, and whether you like them or not, they've made entire careers of being career guys over these athletes.
Yeah.
That's a problem,
because that's the arena where they can be alpha dogs, because they couldn't be alpha dogs in possibly the desired or preferred arena. So, like, once that game is over, Serena, you're now in my arena, and I'm the big dog.
Do you think, look, I know some people are going to give us some shit for it because of SJW bullshit, but, like, bless you. Do you think Bless you. Do you think that...
Don't laugh at my sneeze.
I'm leaving it all in. Bless you, number 3. This is all staying in. Number 4. How much do you think masculinity has to do with the fact that we are talking about Naomi, and we've always given Serena a hard time? And, even though LeBron and a lot of these guys have talking about, mental health, that it's a sports world regardless. Like, look, we're 2 dudes.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think there's any... I think you have to be blind to not understand a little bit that we give some of these women a hard time because there are women in the sports world.
It's masculinity, and it's coming again.
Yeah, here we go. Make sure you guys are saying bless you to Everitt. It's allergy season, kids. It is 90-something degrees outside in the beautiful city of Chicago. So trust us, it's feeling it.
And we chose to wear black.
Oh, yes. I mean, I'm doing X-Men today because we're doing unity and making sure that everybody feels included.
But I also do find it rather peculiar that they tend to be a bit more aggressive on black women.
And that's not just in sports.
And it's just not in sports. But if we're going to go there, we're going to go there.
Our show.
Black women are often very much disrespected. There's a level of there's an expectation that black women must place their humanity on hold. They often have to light themselves on fire to keep other people warm. And I mean, you look at the narrative that was coming up from Serena Williams, when she was complaining about a call. Yeah. The next day there was the exaggerated cartoon of her. Yeah. But we see Tom Brady, display the same kind of behavior, and he's looked at as demonstrating leadership and fire and competitiveness. But, Serena, it's, all the very much backhanded comments you can make. Well, was it her time of the month? Or, angry black woman? Or, big mama? Or all that
anything,
kind of
all of it. Yeah, all the blame, the lame shit that you get from it.
That internalized misogyny and internalized racism will tend to come up.
It sucks because...
I wish Courtney was here because she could probably...
she'll be on
much better than I can.
Anybody who's joined us from Outreach Radio Chicago over on WSBC 1240 AM, WNDC 750 AM. We've had Courtney on the show. We've actually had E-Train on the show, too. It was a collaboration of 3 of us. We talked about race in America, and it was right in time, too. We were doing a Tulsa Massacre episode over on Murder Mysteries and More. Yeah. It was a really good conversation. Courtney will definitely be on this podcast because we do whatever the hell we want here.
That podcast is almost a year old that we
probably right around a year old. And what's nice is that we own this damn show. So, if people don't like it, they could pound sand and kick rocks, or they could stick around and have some fun conversation. We love everybody. So, but we're having this conversation because we have the unique perspective of being, minorities in a dying yet clinging on to life industry. We have goals outside of the industry. We have thoughts about it inside and out. And then we have unique perspectives of like, I'm a white boy Hispanic, and you're a chocolatey black dude.
I'm about as black as they come.
You know what I'm saying?
I've heard all the jokes.
Yeah, so it's like That's
for another podcast.
We'll definitely go down that rabbit hole one day because I got some shit I gotta say. But it's funny, like we do have that perspective. So I don't think like we're talking down to people. I think this is the best way that you can have this conversation because at the end of the day, at least we have the realization of knowing that we're not a half Japanese, half Asian. I'm sorry if I'm getting it wrong. Half black.
She's
23-year-old,
half Japanese, half Haitian.
Yeah. Phenom at 23 years old, being this mature at the very least. Like you and I, we can only sympathize, empathize, and put ourselves in that shoe so much. But even as minority men, even you as a darker skinned black man, even me as a white skinned Hispanic, like we can't understand that type of like pressure or like that type of scrutiny in the French Open.
Yeah.
Like that's its own huge thing. What I don't like is people then co-opting this into something else, trying to make this something that it's not. I think this should be, and I guess we could kind of, as we've been doing this episode, I love that we're doing this episode too, but I think maybe the one thing that you and I always try to talk about is like solutions. And I think the solution to all this is an understanding from both the athletes and the reporters, the media, but also the leagues. When you watch a LeBron James press conference, it's not just him in front of a microphone. He doesn't have a window right by him. He's got a big blue curtain that's got a bunch of sponsorship. Now, he's getting some of that money, but you know who's getting most of that money? The team, the TV stations. So it's not just the media. The reason why these athletes have to do this is because there's money being made from it.
Yeah.
So I think we also have to come to the realization that while it might be symbiotic, it's also parasitic.
Yeah, it is. As you know, I recently went through The Boys, and
Shout out to the boys.
I don't know if we're allowed to like say expletives on here.
No, I'll show you. Do what you want.
But there's the part where, the news leak out about the Compound V
Yes.
being released.
Yeah.
And A-Train is talking to not Star-Lord.
Yeah, different universe.
What's Boo Boo's name?
Starlight?
Starlight. And he's like, you don't F up the money.
Yeah.
That's what you don't get. You don't F up the money. And so, like, the athletes gotta, in the back of their mind, they're like, probably getting word, like, don't F up the money.
We saw with China.
Yeah. Naomi is probably effing up the money.
And it's not only messing up the money. You notice that the other, like the U.S. Open, Wimbledon, they all stood side by side with the French Open.
Yeah.
And it's caused some backlash. But, like, the reason they're doing this, you can't have people getting out of line.
Yeah.
And that's how you guys should know. For all the people who do want to make it political, like, if you want small government, there's nothing more of a better example than this. Like, government overreaching its boundaries, and that's the same thing with these organizations. Granted, I 100% understand they're getting paid for it and that this is in their contract.
Yeah.
But, like, there's ways to work around it. Like, she's a big enough star, and these are big enough issues where, like, let's say she was really comfortable with, like, a handful of reporters. Then pick those reporters and then make everything else eligible. Like, let those be allowed to be seen. There's ways to work around this, but I really wanted to just talk about this conversation because it's all just been a big cluster when it comes to the way the media has been with these athletes, the way these fans have been with these athletes, and the way these athletes have been kind of outwardly just showing a disdain for a lot of things going on. I think we're at a boiling point, and what's really disappointing is everybody needs each other. We saw when these fans aren't in these arenas how boring or how ghostly these games are. And we also see what happens when we don't have sports for 6 months, how much we miss these athletes. We also understand how important it is to get these stories out. Imagine if these stories didn't get out about what happened with the LA Dodgers and the Houston Astros, where we were hearing about the stealing signs. Like, these are all stories that need to get out there. We all need each other. The fans need all this. So yeah. I don't know why we're never all pulling the rope, and I guess we should know better. We couldn't get people to agree on a pandemic.
No. Like, we're expecting people to act with integrity and to live by some kind of code of ethics when, especially this business that we're in often lacks that. As we were saying off the mic, there's a ruthlessness to this.
That a lot of people have.
Yeah. And sometimes you have to be willing to go there.
But I think what's also scary is...
let me say you have to. It's not a requirement. You can act in integrity. Us two brothers here, we are prime examples of that. Are we where we want to be? I mean, that's subjective. I mean, that's how we want to define success as. But, like, you don't have to go the route of being ruthless or immoral. But for some, it might be something you would want to consider.
I think we've rewarded it too much. I think we've rewarded people being ruthless and being crude. And, I think there's a difference between no nonsense and being mean. I think that's a thing. Like, and I know people get weird when people talk about feelings and being mean or whatever. I'm like, when someone's an asshole. You just know when someone's an asshat.
Yeah.
And, like, there are just some reporters who are complete asshats. I think there's some athletes who are complete asshats. Doesn't change the fact that we all should be treating each other with some form of respect professionally and also some form of understanding. Like, she's a 23-year-old. Yeah, this is a woman that, like, has a lot of pressure. How about we cut her a little slack? Same token, how about we cut some of these beat reporters slack? Not all of them are working for the major company. They're not writing the headlines. They're not the publisher. They're out there to get a story. That's the one thing I've always had against, I wouldn't say against people, but one thing I've always argued against people is the media makes a bunch of money. Like, not the reporter. The reporter's eating ramen noodles in their little apartment. They're not making anything. They're trying to do the best story that they can. Your publication, maybe. Your editor, maybe.
Believe me, if I was making Seacrest money, I would be obnoxious.
Marvel, You want to send us money? I'll be a shill. Come on. It doesn't work that way. That's just not how any of this shit
I will
works.
happily apologize on camera like John Cena did. Okay.
Taiwan what? With that, Everett, it was a fun little episode. We got a chance to have some barbecue. We had some brewskis. It was a fun time. This episode was a very loosey-goosey one. We were just kind of BSing, and I was like, hey, why don't we just talk about the Naomi thing on camera? It was going to take us down a bunch of different ways. We've been talking about the industry. So I think this is not just about what she's going through. I think this is just about our industry in general that's always growing, but it's evolving. You talked about the shot jock up into the podcaster. Now you have, journalists who are from major newspapers, but what is a major newspaper now compared to, like, let's say, The Athletic or The Atlantic, like paywalls, like there's still prestige. The prestige has changed. I thought this was an interesting conversation.
It is. And it's really amazing just how much that one story can expand the web, because everything is so connected, man.
Yeah.
Not to sound all esoteric and woo, but,
it's needed.
We can veer off because it all ties together, So.
What are your thoughts about now? I think this is 4 or 5 episodes deep.
I think this is episode 4.
Jeez, what are your thoughts about Two Nerds of a Feather? How are you feeling about kind of the conversations we've ran the gambit? We've talked about being absolutely excited, ecstatic about Justin Fields being our quarterback, which has completely changed our demeanor.
Yes,
we've talked about TV and cartoon theme songs. We've talked about fans interactions and whatnot. Like, how are you feeling about where we're at right now? Now being able to talk a little bit about mental health awareness and kind of, again, another road that we could talk about. Like, some people, and again, if you don't like these episodes, wait till the next week or go in the archives, go through the network. There's a bunch of episodes for you to enjoy. But I think, how are you enjoying us just kind of using this as a platform to just have that conversation that, maybe starts with this little kernel of a main story and just becomes this thing?
I mean, me personally, I feel very content with this because, we call ourselves Two Nerds of a Feather, but we're not very specific on what we're being nerdy about.
Right.
You can be a nerd about anything. You can be a history nerd. You can be an enthusiast about mental health. You can, have passions and enthusiasm about a lot of things. And luckily for us, we have that going for us, as well as the depth to really dive into it. Obviously, we have a window like that we like to do it in, but as you can see, I mean, these are conversations that we can come back for with a part in the future. And so we hope that you all join us for this ride. We start off with the topic, obviously, but in most podcasts, it's pretty much conversation.
Yeah.
We're not trying to be your terrestrial radio show. You're going to hear two friends shooting the breeze and, real ideas being shared in real time. It's nothing but table here. So there's no papers that I've had to prep for. It's a lot of it is off the dome, which might be to our detriment. You never know, but
it's all right.
We want to give it to you real because we're real human beings, just like you and just like our athletes are. And if you disagree, Justin Fields is the quarterback of the Chicago Bears, and you're not going to talk to me, Michelangelo, or Naomi Osaka any kind of way.
And with that, we thank each and every one of you for joining us on this edition of the Two Nerds of a Feather podcast. I think it is important to let the folks know, let the peoples know, because we do it for the people, that on patreon.com/Mercado Airwaves Network, I have put on a new tier. You guys, the awesome people, the lovely people, the beautiful people will get to decide episodes. So if you want us to talk about Marilyn Manson, you want us to talk about Halloween, you want us to talk about great summer food, you guys want us to let us know.
Let us talk about Halloween.
That'd be fantastic.
The season and the franchise.
Oh my goodness. What month is it? All right, we're going to be doing that soon anyway. So at least pay us money and we'll do it. It's only $1. $1. You get to choose the episode, and E-Train and I will have a lovely conversation about it. So that's kind of fun that we have over at patreon.com/Mercado Airwaves.
Yeah, you all kind of own us.
Yeah, they do.
Like how you think you own the athletes.
I don't know. We should be telling them that they own two minorities. Should we be telling the peoples this?
I mean, I guess if you all are as well, you can kind of look at it as like a partnership.
Or go to my OnlyFans, okay? My OnlyFans. I just bleach. You know what? inappropriate. We'll move along.
Wait, I was about to say, you really got an OnlyFans?
Well, only for select people. That's how we're ending this episode. A very somber, awesome episode about bleaching myself and on OnlyFans, huh? Wonderful times. Everitt, where can people find you? When are you going to be on the radio? Save me from this from this quicksand.
You can find me at Instagram at Bodhi World Peace. Oh, that was hot.
That's all right.
At Bodhi World Peace, no relation to Meta. That's BODHI. World Peace. If you see me blinking hard, it's to keep myself from.
Bless you! Hey, shout out everybody to Everett O'Neill. So this is the first episode. This is. Bless you. This is all staying in. Shout out to Red Letter Media, who's taught me there's nothing better than seeing the actual human interaction of doing these shows with your host. For everybody, again, you guys saw back there, it is summertime. Make sure you guys are following Everitt. Give him a shout out. He came to the Mercado Airwaves studio. He wanted to be here so that we didn't have any drop issues with the internet. But of course, Mother Nature and Lady Allergy has visited our boy. So thank you for fighting through them.
I appreciate it. All right, so continuing, it's at Bodhi World Peace, BODHI World Peace. You can follow me on Instagram. I'm also on the radio, WXLC 102.3 XLC, Saturday night, 6 p.m. to midnight Central Time, that is, and Sundays, 11 a.m. to 3 p.m.
And you guys can catch me all over the Mercado Airwaves Network. We have Sports from the Couch, The Good Brothers, Murder Mysteries, and more. Our sister podcast, The Gone Missing Podcast. Our interviews with athletes and celebrities. And you can catch me on the radio in Chicago and Chicagoland area with my outreach show about the community over at Outreach Radio Chicago. That's Wednesday nights at 7 p.m. on WSBC 1240 a.m. and WNDZ 750 a.m. Chicago and Chicago Heights. Does that ever tweak you out or tweak you out a little bit that when we say our goodbyes that like we're radio professionals?
A little bit.
It's still a little freaky, huh?
Yeah.
He's Everett O'Neill. I'm Mike Mercado. We will see you next time here on the Two Nerds of a Feather podcast.